That's yeah. That's such an interesting story, and something that particularly piqued my interest, that I think is very fundamental to this whole story is when you mentioned that at the beginning of the evangelical movement, the whole pro-life thing wasn't this huge push as it is now, and as of course it started in I believe the 1980s. Can you just talk about a little bit how that element of right-wing evangelicalism was introduced, and why it became such a huge talking point of the Republican Party, why it became such a massive push towards the evangelical voters?
Yeah, I mean, let's start with the hard, cold fact first, aside from evangelicals, and that if the American left, in particular the feminist movement, and in particular the organization of Planned Parenthood, had wanted to design a way to legalize abortion in more states, because it was already legal in California. Ronald Reagan had legalized it. It was already legal in New York. Rockefeller had legalized it. These were two Republicans. Republicans were on board with legalizing abortion state by state in different ways. But if they had wanted to choose a way to turn it into an issue, the way to do it is to write Roe v. Wade as extremely as it was written and as arbitrarily it was written. And by the way, I'm pro-choice now, so that's my perspective. I'm talking about tactics here. And so the stupidity of Planned Parenthood in pushing forward a program to Justice Blackmun that was guaranteed to pull every single conservative voice in the country together on one issue eventually was Roe. Just give you a point of reference. In France, for instance, where abortion was legalized long before the States, or in the UK, or in Scandinavian countries, there's no country that ever legalized abortion up to the third trimester. Nobody. In France, you need a judge to sign off with 3 doctors if you go past week 12. And that's still to this day, because they knew they had a conservative element in the population. They did not want to wave a red flag. They did it smart. It came out exactly the same, because life of the mother or threat to her health, fetal anomaly, all these things were covered too. But they wrote it in a way that was sensitive to the fact that some people were going to be outraged, and they did it incrementally. You know, the sort of fait accompli of Roe was a disaster in terms of a tactic. And it basically...
Yeah, one of the things I read about Justice Blackmun when he wrote the decision that, you know, I think is kind of indicative of the problem that you're bringing up here is the fact that he actually wrote it with the perspective of a doctor treating a patient and giving them full leeway to make that decision, as far as not considering it as, like you said, an issue that was going to wedge the population. So he was painting with a more of an eye for the physician and a treatment, not considering
right
the women's rights issue.
Yeah, and also not with a recognition of, hey, where are we living? This is the United States with a vast evangelical and conservative Roman Catholic population. That's point one. Point two, having said that, it still wasn't an evangelical issue until my dad and I and C. Everett Koop came along and made it one. And I this is not something I rejoice at taking credit for, but that's the case. It was a Roman Catholic issue. And then there were various evangelicals who were exercised about it, like C. Everett Koop, who became Ronald Reagan's Surgeon General. He came and talked Dad into doing something with it. First of all, in the last episodes of How Should We Then Live, which was this book film series on art and culture, Dad used the example of Roe v. Wade as what he called judicial fiat, where the court is going too far in a secular direction. But that wasn't the thrust of the series. The second series we did, Whatever Happened to the Human Race, that was the whole series. And that was because Dr. Koop was ultra pro-life, ultra reform, very theological, and also the head surgeon in Philadelphia Children's Hospital, had all the medical degrees and science background and so forth. He had a very strong personal pro-life commitment. That said, he wasn't crazy. When he became Surgeon General, he was the guy that stood up for the rights of the gay community to have AIDS treated with dignity. He was the guy who started talking about condom distribution. He was the guy who said it was nonsense and not medical science when pro-lifers were saying that women are more subject to breast cancer if they've had an abortion, and all sorts of other stuff. So Koop wasn't crazy. He was just a doctor who was committed to life, and abortion outraged him personally for many, many different reasons. That said, when we took our series out, we found that most evangelical leaders did not look at this as what they would have called our issue. It was a Roman Catholic issue. And they didn't do it on a couple bases. First of all, they saw it as joined to the issue on contraceptives. Evangelicals had for a long time accepted contraceptives use, where Roman Catholics had not. in terms of their official doctrine, that is. I'm not speaking of individuals. So the climate was, hey, this has nothing to do with us. Why are you bothering with this? Secondly, in the words of Billy Graham, who said this to my dad personally, when Dad talked to him at the Mayo Clinic, when Dad was there for his cancer treatments and Billy was there for an annual checkup, and several other conversations we had with him in person that I was party to. How can I preach the love of Jesus for women when we, are saddling them with this? I've always thought that a girl who gets in trouble, as he would put it back in the language of those days, when a girl gets in trouble, who am I to, and so forth and so on. Simple compassion. Now, nobody was thinking in terms of late-term abortion or this, that, and the other. It was just basically, quote unquote again, who am I as a male evangelist? A girl gets in trouble. This is the same Billy Graham who in 1952 desegregated his evangelistic rallies in the South, saying, I'm not coming to Mississippi or Georgia or wherever it may be if we're going to have segregated meetings. I'm not doing it. Jesus would have black and white together. He was an idealistic, old-fashioned, good old evangelical. Yeah, he got too close to Nixon. Yes, he went on anti-communist rants. But Billy Graham was the real deal. At that point, Jerry Falwell Jr.'s father, who started Liberty, he was pro-choice too, in the sense that he said, this isn't my issue. He was a segregationist. So he said, what are we going to talk? Why are we talking about abortion? The real issue is we've got to keep white schools white. So they were all over the map. Dr. Dobson was a psychologist on family practice, talking to people about how to have families and discipline children. It wasn't his issue. He didn't want to know about it. Pat Robertson never talked about it. My father convinced these men to take a stand on it. And then something happened. Jack Kemp, who was a congressman who then became Bob Dole's running mate, Ronald Reagan, and a number of his operatives got wind of our series through C. Everett Koop, who was pretty politically connected. And suddenly they saw this as a way to painlessly, because they weren't going to do anything about it, solidify their base. And so they, like us, encouraged evangelicals to take a stand. And then evangelicals, who have always been hungry for relevance, because who cares what pastors think, and so you want to be relevant, they wanted access to power. All of a sudden, they're sitting down now, having taken a stand on this issue, telling Ronald Reagan and Jack Kemp and others, or in my case, I personally telling Jack Kemp, because I was staying in his basement at the time in Washington when we were there launching the series, that if you want the evangelical and the Christian and to vote for you, and when I was saying Christian, I meant Roman Catholics, evangelicals, everybody else, take a stand on this issue, because we were beginning to see people move our way on it. Then something happened. It became a litmus test for the religious right and the Republican Party for one simple reason. Evangelical leaders found it another way to keep their population enraged 24/7, because they're murdering babies, because keeping schools segregated wasn't playing so well anymore. And so the two big issues they used to raise money with were help us stop the homosexual agenda and help us stop the feminist agenda / abortion and family values. That all was sort of one package. It worked great. Send me $25, I'll save babies, or I'll stop homosexuals from buggering your son in school. Either way, it's a nice little thing that keeps working. The Republicans, on the other hand, saw it also as a way that they could rouse the troops. I was at the National Religious Broadcasters the year Reagan appeared, called in a message to us and said, and we sort of endorsed him. So it was a quid pro quo. It was a marriage of convenience in a leadership structure that didn't actually care much about the issue, but wanted to find ways to get these apathetic evangelicals who the knock on them was these guys they don't even vote. They're apolitical. They're going to church. They're talking about Jesus. They don't care about politics. They vote for Democrats or Republicans half the time. They're not even divided along party lines. If they are, it's to do with race in the South. The Democrats are race, they play the South, the race card, and then Nixon comes along. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is great. Nobody's going to call you a racist if you stand up for pro-life, as they would if you're on segregation topics. You can raise a shitload of money because you can keep people mad all the time. And evangelicals and Republicans, or any anybody in politics, you need things to organize around. Crisis pregnancy centers, fundraising dinners. Where's the guy running for Congress against the Democrat going to meet his voters? At the thing I'm speaking at, a fundraiser with 3,000 people paying $100 a head at a table for the local crisis pregnancy center so we can offer all alternatives to abortion. It took on a life of its own as an organizing fundraising principle on the religious right that never failed and was much better than bashing gays, because you're saving babies. Oh, we love women. We want to help them. We just want to offer them an alternative. Send us a check tomorrow morning.
Basically, what you've lined out is that the pro-life movement was essentially a fear-mongering racket for the Republican Party to fundraise and, scaremonger their voters into retaining power and making more money.
With one caveat, and that is a lot of the rank and file, just like a lot of the Trump rank and file right now as we're talking, believe that he won the election, got talked into believing it, and they became very sincere about it.